The torches and pitchforks are out for Kyle Shanahan, but how much of what the haters are saying is actually true? Well, I'll talk about it with someone who you all know, you all love, and more importantly, you all trust on today's Gold Standard podcast. What is good, everybody? Welcome to another Gold Standard podcast. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera, and if you are watching the stream right now, I know there is a smile on your face because today I am joined by a very special guest, Oscar Aparicio from the Better Rivals podcast. Oscar, how are you?
I'm doing great. The energy is live. It's a great intro. It's back in the podcast saddle. I don't get in this saddle often anymore, really at all. So it's good to be on the show again, Rob.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you're here because I'm just going to be honest here. When I find myself in times of trouble, Oscar Aparicio comes to me speaking words of wisdom. So that's why we need you today here, because Kyle Shanahan is feeling the heat right now. The team is 5-7. They were humiliated the last 2 weeks. They've lost by a combined score of 73-20, or 73-20, I should say. And people, a significant amount of 49ers fans that I hear from all the time, are done with Kyle Shanahan. They want to get rid of him. They want him out of town. They don't care about anything. They're just done. And what I wanted to have you on to talk about today is some of the narratives that people have said, because people accuse me of being a little emotional. People accuse me of going for clicks. I know hard to believe, I know. But people accuse me of all of that and being a Shanistan and all that stuff. And I think you are looked at by many 49er fans, and rightfully so, as a calm, level-headed, objective observer of this franchise. So instead of me saying it for the 1000th time, I wanted to talk to you and see what you had to say about all of Kyle Shanahan heat.
Yeah, I mean, look, fire the guy is really the take. I'm just kidding. No, don't fire him. Look, apparently you've been talking to my cousin because my cousin loves to text the family text thread. Ya perdimos, which is like a playoff of we lost, but in Spanish and with Purdy, because he's kind of over Shanahan too. And I get it. I understand that this was a team that went to the Super Bowl, had a historically good offense last year. And now you look at this team and you're like, what is going on? What's happening? And so I get the sentiment and I get the frustration that people have, because I have it too. It sucks to watch bad offensive football. We haven't been used to bad offensive football in San Francisco for some time. But I think that in the context of what's going on with the team, there are lots of things that are contributing to this kind of performance. And then there are some things that are specific to Kyle Shanahan. So let's talk about the things that I think are things with the team. I think it is tough to continue to play effectively 2, 3, 4 extra games a year for as many years as the Niners have played it, and maintain that over time. I do think that injuries suck, and not having a wide receiver that is your man beater, that is going to beat man coverage on the field, is going to be tough. I also think that the brain drain is beginning to be felt. You can't lose high level coaches year over year over year over year, and now you're on Nick Sorensen and think that all of a sudden that's going to be the same level as Robert Saleh or DeMeco Ryans, now head coaches whose defenses are doing fairly well. I think all that is true. And I think it is also true that there are some things with Shanahan's offense that defenses have started to poke at and prod at and really begin to exploit in a way that he doesn't have great answers for. And you put all that in a bucket, you shake it around, you take away 2 Achilles and bust a PCL, and all of a sudden you get to where the Niners are right now.
All right. There's a lot there to react to. Let's start with the scheme questions, because I do feel like people are saying his scheme is predictable, and he can't call plays. He's not even really a good play caller anymore. And I'm just sitting there saying the offense scored 60 touchdowns last season. Now, I agree with you that it's definitely become harder. The system has become more prevalent around the league, and defenses are better at defending it than they ever have been before. I think all of that is true. But the idea suddenly that Kyle Shanahan can't call plays, or can't adjust, I think is incorrect. What say you?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what you do is whenever you're looking at something, you take a look at to try to not react so like harshly one way or the other, to not just kind of go with the wind. You say, what do I know? What do I know is true? And then how do I update that knowledge with information as I gain it? And we have years and years and years of Kyle Shanahan being able to put together a really, really good offense. Going back to his time in Houston, going back to his time in Atlanta, even his time in Cleveland, everywhere he has gone, he has managed to put a good offense together. And that's been the case with San Francisco as well. And so I think that one year where you're like, oh, what's going on here doesn't mean that all of a sudden he has crumbled as an offensive play designer or as an offensive play caller. So I don't think that that's where you should land. I think that there are some reasonable questions, though, about how he structures his offense that can be asked. And one thing that hasn't really been talked about in the last couple of weeks, I think, because a snow game is a snow game, but that is important, is one, personnel. How do you react to a lot of the sim blitzes and man coverage and pressures that you're going to get that you see teams like Spagnuolo and those kinds of teams that the Niners have consistently had trouble with, right? Jim Shorts, Steve Spagnuolo, Brian Flores, they all share something in common, which is they love a lot of pressure looks, even if they don't send pressure all the time. And in some cases, they play unconventional zone behind it, like unconventional 2 or Tampa 2, or they are comfortable in man coverage. Shanahan has some trouble with those kinds of defenses. Why? Because he sometimes calls some static routes that are like, one of his favorite routes is like a 7 stop, where it's basically just like run and then just kind of stop and come back around. Those static routes don't work super well if there's not already a lot of space there, right? He likes those kinds of routes. Those are the things that are a feature of his offense. But again, easily fixable. He's got lots of routes in there that are run routes that are running across the field, right? So like he can and will fix these things. But the problem, I think, where you get into it is then, well, how do you handle the pressure and the pressure looks? And that's where I think Shanahan has some choices in his system philosophically that he might need to look at and might need to adjust. But again, if I'm looking at 10 people in the NFL who I trust to make those adjustments, one of them is going to be Shanahan.
Yes, I would think so too. Why is it that you think he likes that 7 stop route so much? Some of those static things.
It's just a choice. It's a choice about what you think you're going to get. It's a choice also, I think, about what your receivers are good at and what your quarterback is good at. I think that a 7 stop works really well when you've got Brandon Ayuk running that 7 stop. Because guess what Brandon Ayuk can do really well? He can accelerate through the stem, he can stack DBs, and he can stop literally on a dime. Juwan Jennings is wonderful. I love Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings was a podcast favorite when we had the podcast. He was one of our favorites. But do you want to know what Juwan Jennings does not do well? Accelerate really quickly and get out of his break, because he is more of a slower wide receiver, right? And that works for 3rd down, 5 yards, carry 6 defenders on your back. Not super great when you're trying to beat man coverage and you've got a sticky DB. Deebo Samuel is, at this season, worryingly so, almost non-functional against man coverage. And that's a problem. So now you've got your best man beater who's not there, and you've got a wide receiver core that's not really built to beat man coverage, and a quarterback who might be getting pressured a bit more quickly than he was because of pressure looks. Now things that did work in the past don't seem to work as much anymore.
One thing that did work in the past that I feel like they are doing less and less of is play action. The strength of the system was Kyle's play action and all the funky ways he could get to it and how they could disguise it and use it. Basically, for every run, they had a play action and it was working and they were really good at it. But for the past few years, they have been using play action less and less and less. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if Brock doesn't like turning his back to the defense or what the reason is, but it seems like that was their bread and butter. And for some reason, they're choosing not to do it as much anymore.
Yeah, so this is where you get into a little bit of like, where do you pull your stats from? Because everyone's going to qualify this a little bit differently. But if you use PFF, and that's generally what I do between them and Summer Sports or Sumner Sports, and you look at Brock's play action passing rate this year as compared to last year, it's only about 2 or 3% different, which is about maybe 1 to 2 plays per game. So it's not wildly different. That's a variance that you could explain by, let's say, you're behind more often than you were last year. And so you're not going to rely on play action pass because, well, you're behind, right? You don't think it works as much, or you're just in a hurry up situation, or you've got to get more plays in. And so that could explain that variance by itself. So I know it feels like they haven't been using it a lot. I think what's clear is that they're using it less than they did with maybe Jimmy Garoppolo, or they use it less than maybe like Nick Mullins. But if you compare last year Brock Purdy and this year Brock Purdy in terms of play action usage, at least per PFF, I'll probably want to check just to be sure. It's only about 2 or 3% off. So that's not a huge thing. I do know that I think Brock prefers more under like gun wide open spread plays, right? Which we've seen more of with Brock. But that is Kyle understanding what his quarterback likes and then like building in plays and running things that his quarterback likes. And I think that's a good thing for a play caller to do.
Okay, so what I was going off of is that they were 27th in play action usage rate on early downs in the first 3 quarters last year. They used it on only 29% of attempts, which I was
okay.
surprised
So you're
at.
talking specifically about like early down play action usage.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So the again, I've been out the podcast game for a while, right? So I don't prep every week for a pod, but my general thoughts on how Shanahan handles Brock Purdy is that Shanahan believes that he has a pure drop back passer in Brock Purdy and a really good one. And so he doesn't feel like he needs to rely on what I'll call system yards, right? Where it's going to be like, okay, you're not going to have the gimmies or the one reads or things like that, where you can go 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and Brock does that really, really well. I think when it comes to things like play action and play action rate, there is there are some limits to what it can do and what you need it for. I think play action usage is not the thing that is going to tip the offense one way or the other in the grand scheme of things. I think by the end of the year, you might see things like normal out or level out. I'm not concerned about play action usage at all, because if Brock Purdy is that guy, you don't even maybe ever need to have play action if he's that guy, right? Never use it. Doesn't matter, right? You still got a quarterback who can sling it. The things that worry me about what's happening with Shanahan's offense right now are more so around what's happening with protections and what's happening against man coverage that I think are the things he's going to have to take a good hard look in the mirror in the offseason.
All right, well, let's dive into those. With the protections, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I would say is it seems like defenses have kind of turned the tables, and they are the ones that have cracked the code, and they have figured out where to line up and where to put certain guys, and they know exactly how the 49ers are going to protect, and they can usually have more success getting a free rusher than maybe they have in the past. Fair or unfair?
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily new. I think more teams are just more willing to do it because everything is a little bit of a give and take. So when you have Brandon Ayuk, when you've got a Deebo Samuel that seems to be working within the offense, now all of a sudden you run the risk of sending pressure, yes, but also maybe getting beat because you've got someone like Ayuk who can beat you really, really quickly. Now you have less of that threat. You've got no CMC out of the backfield. Mason can catch the ball, but he's not really a threat there. You've got Ricky Pearsall, who is still maybe nursing a bullet wound. Who knows? You've got Deebo Samuel. You don't have those players anymore. So now you're like, I don't need a really good corner to send pressure. I'm not going to get cooked super quickly, right? Now I'm more willing to send pressure. That's just, I think, a willingness and not necessarily a crack, because his protection rules have been the same for a while. And defenses have known what those protection rules are. They know how to crack them. Good defensive coordinators know how to crack them. It's just whether or not I'm willing to send my resources that way, knowing that I might get cooked on the back end, right? I think the concerning part is really about philosophical choices. Or if you're going to pick at the scab, it's about philosophical choices. There are offenses where the quarterback can do everything. The extreme pole is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers wants to control everything. He gets up to the line of scrimmage. He's pointing out the mic. He's shifting this guy left. He's pulling someone in. He's going from a 5-0 protection, bringing in his tight end because he thinks there's going to be pressure out this way. And then, he still messes it all up. But that's the level of control that he wants because he likes it, right? He wants to be able to say, I'm smarter than the defense. I know what's coming. I'm going to adjust everything to account for it, right? That's a pretty high cognitive load on a quarterback, right? Under a clock that you're like, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to change or whatever, right? What Shanahan has said is, I don't want my quarterback to worry about that stuff. So my center is going to set the mic, which means that's where we're going to align the protection. That's where I know I'm going to go. or they're going to say it's a 5-0 call. I'm just going to go 5 down, right? The protection's built into the play call a lot of times. You've got jet protection, scat protection, all that stuff, right? And the quarterback's not really going to change too much of it, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to build in a hot route. And that hot route is the route that you're going to throw to quick if you've got an extra rusher that we can account for. That basically becomes on the quarterback. So rather than having to know everything, you got to know one thing. Am I hot? If I'm hot, I throw the ball, right? The problem, though, is that now what teams are doing is because they're not so worried about the wide receivers, they're just saying, well, I can get you to set your protection this way, and then I can drop those players out and send pressure from the other side. So you're basically guaranteeing a free rusher, or you're guaranteeing hot. Brock has gotten him out of those jams a lot. Brock has thrown hot against those a lot. But there's a philosophical choice there, which is I'm reducing complexity for my quarterback. But by doing that, I'm making it easier for the defense to beat the thing that I've built. What the answer is for that, I don't know. There's lots of ways to handle it, right? You give more control to the quarterback. You give more control to the center. You have different protection structures. You can do it lots of different ways. But usually that kind of deep change to your protection doesn't happen in season.
Now, one thing that JT O'Sullivan has brought up a lot is that when there is a hot route, it's away from the blitz. Instead of throwing to replace the blitz, that the hot route, the answer, so to speak, that Kyle has built in is away from the blitz. And so you kind of just have to feel the pressure of the free rusher and get rid of the ball before it gets there, rather than being able to actually see it because you're throwing in the same direction that it's coming from. I don't feel like that's a huge issue, but JT O'Sullivan considers it a big problem. Basically, he says it's much harder on your quarterback.
Yeah, it can be. And you think about JT O'Sullivan as a person, what is he concerned about? I mean, his whole channel is called QB School, right? It's from the quarterback's perspective. It's the position that he played. So it makes sense that he thinks, yeah, I want to know how much time I have before the guy who's running at me to take my head off actually gets to me. Makes perfect sense. Part of the problem with the way that Kyle calls his hots is, though, is he doesn't know where the pressure is coming from. So his hot route might be built in on the right side. And if the pressure is coming on the right-hand side, great, you're throwing into the hot. But if the pressure is coming in on the other side, now it's not. What you can do, though, and this is a feature that's built into Kyle's system, is you can call flipper. Flipper is exactly what you think it is. You flip the protection. So now if your protection is sliding one way, the quarterback has the ability to say flipper, and then it goes the other way. So you can actually change the protection if you think it's coming from one direction, to then kind of throw into the hot if you think it's going in. Again, cognitive load. I don't know if Brock does that. It's kind of hard to hear sometimes what they say. Sometimes you can hear the stuff, sometimes you can't. But that is a feature of Shanahan's offense. The quarterback does have the ability to flip protection.
And that would be Brock. That would not be the center. Brock is the one that would have to do that.
Right. Usually the center will set the mic and then Brock will change it.
Okay. All right. See, I'm learning things here. This is why I wanted to have you on. You always make me a better, smarter fan. And I'm grateful to you for it. And everybody is, as a matter of fact. Okay. Couple other things. Some of these are just crazy, but I'm writing them down because I want to make sure I address as many as possible. How about this one? Kyle Shanahan is not a good leader. That's what I heard a lot of. I don't know how you make 4 NFC championship games in 5 years and 2 Super Bowls without being a good leader, but that's what a lot of people are saying. He's not a good leader, and he's definitely not as good a leader as Jim Harbaugh, according to people.
Yeah, that's such a wild comment to make. Like, I love Jim Harbaugh. I love Jim Harbaugh a lot. He was like one of the big reasons that we got into the podcast game to begin with. I think you can say that Jim Harbaugh is his own brand of leader and a good leader in his own way, but also realize that, like, so is Kyle Shanahan. Like, when we think about leadership, what do we think? We've got to define what that means. Well, have we heard basically anything locker room wise since Kyle Shanahan has been here? Outside of contract negotiations, the locker room has been basically a harmonious, happy place, irrespective of like weird, awkward quarterback controversies with Jimmy Garoppolo ghosting people, right? Like you've got weird, what could be potentially weird locker room dynamics, and you never really hear a peep out of this locker room, right? And that, I think, is like part of the complexion that is a good leader at the head of the organization. I think you think about finding people and putting them in positions. I think you might be running into the limits of that currently with like our defensive coordinator and maybe some folks on offense, but you've got 7 years of top-notch head coaching talent that he was able to find and or develop over the course of 7 years that he's been here. And like, what else do you want out of a leader? Like, I think people are just mad that we're not winning and they feel like we should. And so they're looking to blame a lot. And I get that. I get that impulse. But let's not forget the fact that we're still talking about 7 years of like, and I mean, like, if we knock off the first two, right? 5 years of really, really good coaching, really good leadership, really good offensive football. And that doesn't mean that he's going to guarantee a coaching spot here forever, but like, it's a lot better than anything else that we can probably find out there. Because, like, here's a question I'll ask you. If you were going to trade Kyle Shanahan for anyone, right? Who would you trade him for?
Andy Reid. That's probably it.
Yeah. I would say Andy Reid. There's an argument for McVay, right? Like, that's part of like the sliding doors, like, kind of thing, right? Which the Lombardi might change the way you feel about that whole thing. But I think like that's the echelon that you're talking about, right? And maybe if you're like super on the hot train, like Ben Johnson, but we don't know if that guy can do it, right? There's literally a graveyard of coaches that were the hot shot offensive coordinator that we all thought could do it, and then they just can't for some reason. And maybe it's because they don't have the staff, or they don't have the connections, or they're really good at calling and designing plays, but not good at some of the other stuff, right? Like, there's lots of stuff that goes into being a head coach and being a leader that is outside of what Ben Johnson does right now. And he might be a fantastic coach. I don't know, right? But that's the point, is we don't know. So when you think about who would you trade him for? Yeah, it's the Andy Reids of the world. It's the McVays of the world. It's, if you want the CEO coach, maybe John Harbaugh or Mike Tomlin, right? But like, that's the echelon of coaches we're talking about. You don't just punt on that because you had a down year.
From your lips to God's ears. Thank you, because that is exactly what I have been saying. Ben Johnson's cool, and sometimes you get a guy that becomes Kyle Shanahan, but sometimes you get a Brian Daboll who's about to get fired in New York. Like you said, there is a graveyard of guys that belong in that bin. I do think Lee Ving brings up a good point here. The Cabo click being a thing. That is not a good look from Kyle. And I have said that since the beginning. I think that is a terrible look to have this click of guys that are like buddy with the head coach, that are separate from all the other teams or all the other players in the locker room. I don't think the Cabo click is a good look.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways to slice that, right? Because you can come in on one side and you're like, man, that click is bad news bears, and you've got, Cabo buddy ball, which is, maybe why Juszczyk is playing. But then on the flip side, you think to yourself, well, some people really appreciate and want a leader that connects with his team and finds the value in them as humans and understands them as whole humans and spends some time with them. And they're adults, and they understand that that's going to work for some people and it's not going to work for others. And no one's offended because he's able to manage through that in the locker room. Do I know what the answer is? No, I've got my own opinions on it. But I honestly, of all the things that are going to be the problem with Kyle Shanahan, it's not the fact that he goes to Cabo with Kyle Juszczyk. It's going to be the fact that he can't figure out the other things around his offense and the team. It's not going to be vacations in Cabo.
Warlock said, and thanks for the super chat, Warlock, I understand that the fans, including me, want Kyle to stay, but it seems he doesn't want to stay and spend another 3 to 5 years with a rebuild. Brock ain't it. I don't know that I think Kyle does want to stay. Like, people have brought up the idea of, well, we should trade Kyle Shanahan, which I think is fascinating, because if you were to trade Kyle Shanahan, what would you get for him? You'd get at least 1 first-round pick, which goes to show you how good he is. So why are you trading him in the first place?
There's a good little heuristic that sometimes folks use to be like, well, what should I do? What should I do? What does your opponent not want you to do? Mm-hmm. Right? And like, if I'm in the NFC West and I'm Mike McDonald, or I'm if I'm one, God, I even forgot the Arizona coach, Jonathan Gannon, right?
Yep.
What do I want to see less of? Kyle Shanahan. I'm like, yeah, give me some other rando dude that, like, I can pick that apart, right? But like, this is a tough team to play. This is the team with experience. This is the team that's been there and I know can do it. I don't want to see that. Yeah, give me something else, right? And so, like, yeah, I think sometimes you put yourself in the other person's shoes and it's like, yeah, I would really hate it if the Dallas Cowboys got rid of Jerry Jones. I want Jerry Jones. I would really hate it if they got rid of Mike McCarthy. Why? Because I think Mike McCarthy's not going to win that much, right? So it's like, I want them to keep Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, one less team to worry about in the NFC. Oh, absolutely. Astro says Deebo's issues are because of his buddiness with Kyle Shanahan. I have to say, Oscar, Kyle loves to throw people in the doghouse. Deebo can do anything and never be in the doghouse. He gets plays drawn up for him. I mean, my God, poor Brandon Ayuk got frozen out for half a season because I don't know, he wasn't doing something in practice. I see Deebo's film. I see him half-ass it during games and loaf around during games, and he can do no wrong.
Yeah, it's so funny, the Deebo thing, because he's gotten a really, really bad rap. And this, I think, is interesting because you like would you agree that Deebo, with the ball in his hands, is an absolutely electric player? And in space, he is wonderful. And on some design screens or some runs that aren't the kind of outside looping runs, he can be a game changer, right? We've seen that from him. Was that something that you would kind of agree with?
Yeah, before this year, yeah, I would agree.
Sure, sure. But the point is that as a football player, he can be a difference maker, right?
Yes.
You just have to know that that comes with some downsides. That comes with him not running full speed every play. That comes with him taking some plays off. And so, what do you do in a situation like that? If you're a leader and you've got someone on your team who can be a high performer, you try to get the most out of them and you try to put them in situations where they succeed. And you try to limit situations where they're not going to. But that way, you can get the most out of that player. And that's what I think Kyle does with Deebo. Is he's like, look, I know you're really good at these things, and you may not be great against man coverage. So I'm going to do my best to try to build things for you that take advantage of your skill set and hide the things maybe that don't. But if you look across the league and you look, because Deebo gets a microscope because of what JT O'Sullivan says, I know a lot. But you look at DJ Moore. DJ Moore is another player that got a lot of heat from JT O'Sullivan for not running routes and not having a lot of effort. It's because this happens with all wide receivers across the league. There's very rarely a wide receiver. You may be able to count them on like one or two hands that run full speed every single play all of the time. It's not something that happens often. So I think in the context of wide receivers in general, yeah, he takes plays off. Everyone takes plays off. I think how do you maximize the talent at your disposal? And that's what Kyle's trying to do. And I think that he does that, decently well with Deebo. I think that the question with Deebo is, based on his limitations, do you end up paying him as much as you're paying him into the future? And I think that's a slightly different question that I think John Lynch and Kyle have to answer. That is not like, what's going on with you in man coverage right now.
But I also feel like with Deebo, yeah, I can make all those and live with the stuff you're talking about if you are making those game-breaking, game-changing plays. But when you stop doing that, when you become a glorified, a $30 million kick returner for lack of, which is really what he is this year, that seemingly is only value to the team right now, I don't have as much patience and tolerance for that other stuff. If all they got to do is run man coverage against any freaking corner and take you out of the game completely, I want to see you busting your ass all the time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and again, it's about what you value and what you want, right? And so I would rather, if I have to choose, I would rather a wide receiver with his skill set that takes plays off, that I know has limitation against man coverage because of what I can do in other areas of the game. If you're going to hunt for the unicorn that's going to be like all effort all the time, 100% of the time, great. You can find those guys too. They're usually in like the 5th, 6th, 7th round. They are really high effort guys, hard hat guys. Trent Taylor might have been one of them. But you know what? They're probably also going to have some other limitations. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's outside of maybe one of the guys on the wall over here. Oh, I'm reversed. Jerry Rice. There's rarely going to be a perfect product. You just have kind of like, what can they do for me? And then you try to maximize that. Sometimes it's going to be effort. Sometimes it's going to be zone coverage. Sometimes it's going to be yak. How do you maximize that and get the most out of it? I think that's what Shanahan is trying to do. I do think, though, that they have to ask themselves some tough questions about whether what Deebo is able to offer at this point in his career worth what they're paying him. But that has less to do with effort and more to do with his ability to do stuff within the offense now.
Last narrative I want to get to with you. Kyle is not detail oriented. And a lot of people point to his seeming just complete hands-off approach to special teams, where he has literally said, all I want from special teams is to not lose the game for us. And it has continually been an issue during his tenure. They changed special teams coordinators. It hasn't gotten any better. This year is unbelievable. Every network now has the B-roll pack of all the special teams screw-ups that we have seen this year. What do you make of the Kyle Shanahan not being detail-oriented narrative?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one because when you think about everything that Kyle Shanahan does and puts his hands on, if anything, it is like overly detail oriented. It's so hyper specific that it becomes a problem. And this is where I think it gets tough because people want to they feed into their own confirmation biases, right? Like they have something that they believe, and then they try to find any little piece that confirms that bias. And when you think about his offense, right, you talked about Ayuk. Why are so many wide receivers in the doghouse early on in their career, and why does it seem like it's so hard for them to make the roster and play some snaps? Jacob Cowing being one of them, right? It's because they're not super detail oriented in the precision in their routes and the timing of their routes and the depth of their routes. And there are things often that we can't see. I think Ricky Pearsall mentioned one play where he it looked like an overthrow from Brock. And you see that in the game, you see it on film, and you're like, Brock missed him. That sucks, right? And afterwards, Ricky says, I cut the route off. Mm-hmm. And because I cut the route off, that made the pass look bad, but I know I cut the route off, right? That's the kind of stuff where it's like, that's why Shanahan's like, no, it's got to be precise. It's based on timing. Brock Purdy is an anticipation thrower, needs to know exactly where his guys are going to be so that he can throw blind. Incidentally, something that Steve Young did because of advice that he got from Mike Shanahan, is you have to trust your guys and throw blind, right? And that's what Brock does, and does it well. So if he's not detail oriented, then where does that precision go on offense? He's still got that precision. He's still got that detail. It's just that philosophically, he's not going to be in the weeds of special teams in quite the way that I think people would want. What's interesting, though, is that even with that philosophy, if you look at measures of special team success, the Niners have been good on special teams outside of the last 2 years, right? When you think of the Robbie Gould game in Green Bay, right, you win that game on special teams. When you think of the years before that, we had if you look at PFF grades in terms of overall special teams grades, they're good, right? They're good. They're top of the league. It's just that now they're not. I think the more likely explanation is that bottom of the roster is crappier, right? Because you're now a top-heavy team that's paying top-heavy stars. You haven't been able to replenish with draft picks because you traded a bunch of them away for Christian McCaffrey and for Trey Lance, who's no longer on the roster. And the last 2 drafts haven't been great. This draft class is good. So the core of players that are playing special teams are not great, right? And you take someone who's over special teams, move them into defense, and now you've got a special teams coordinator that maybe isn't all that great. And now all of a sudden the narrative is we've got to improve the bottom of our roster, and maybe we need a new special teams coach. And it has nothing to do with the amount of detail that Kyle Shanahan gets into.
Okay, so I feel like we've made some progress. We've talked about how about this one? Kyle Shanahan is a good offensive coordinator, but not a good head coach.
Yeah, to me, again, it goes into like, how do you define what a good head coach is, right? And I think what people are bristling up against is some of the like margin gaining from your head coach. It's the 4th down decision making. It's the clock management. It's the overtime decisions that end up games. Yeah, he's not great at that, right? And that's okay. It's okay to not have a perfect head coach that is perfect in all areas all of the time. And I don't think that you can or should expect that from anyone. I think every head coach is going to have their deficiencies, and that happens to be Kyle's. And it comes from, I think, a place, if I'm going to like armchair psychologist a little bit, it's like he needs the sure thing. He wants the sure thing. He is so good at governing and orchestrating the football world that he can get the outcome that he wants so often, and he works to get it so often, and he generally does. That uncertainty that I might not get it, that loss aversion bias that we all have at some point is really big with him. It's why we overpay for players. It's why we don't go for it on 4th down so often. It's why he kicks field goals and then he probably should go for it. But that is part of who he is. And I think it's fair to not like that. But that in and of itself doesn't make him a good head coach because it doesn't prevent him from being a good head coach, because there's so many things that are required to be a good head coach that he absolutely nails. And those other things are important too.
But the game management stuff, I mean, how has he not learned? But how has somebody not grabbed him and shaken him and said, Kyle, you're making it harder for the team to win? I mean, some of these 4th down decisions are mind-boggling, especially considering that the field goals that he loves to go for are no sure thing at all with Jake Moody back there. So how is he?
Hey, 3rd round pick Jake Moody, okay? Simmer down, all right? Simmer down.
He's been burned by this so many times, Oscar, and yet he seemingly doesn't learn. That is one thing, and I have railed on his game management from the beginning. How has he not seen, okay, this strategy that I keep employing over and over again doesn't work?
Yeah, it's because it's what you choose to focus on. So humans are really bad at probabilities, really, really bad at probabilities, right? And effectively, what you're asking a head coach to do is to not just take into account the times that it goes well, but also take into account the times that it goes poorly. Because for every instance where we're like, why wouldn't you kick it? If you would have kicked it there, you would, or if you would have gone for it there, you would have won the game. It requires making the fourth down, right? You think about the Lions in the NFC Championship game and the failed fourth down conversions. You don't think that Shanahan's going, yeah, but every time that we win one, sometimes we lose some, right? And every time that you think about going for it, I was just at the Texas versus Texas A&M game this past weekend. Hook 'em horns, beat little brother. It was wonderful. But they went for it on fourth down, right? In a 17-7 game, you don't think that knowing that they were going to fail on 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, they don't kick effectively a gimme field goal and stay in the game at 10 to 17, right? But they went for it. Analytics say go for it, but they lost it, right? For every instance in we say go for it, you're going to win, these coaches are going to say, yes, but you might lose. And that's just because of their approach to the game. And that's their person, their ability to manage all that stuff, right? And so I think it's tough and it's tricky. But I do think that the Niners, I know, have a good analytics staff. And I know that Kyle Shanahan gets the numbers. He just would rather move towards more of a sure thing than not. It's part of who he is as a person. I don't think that's going to change. I still think that he can be and is a really, really good coach as a result of it. And I still think that he can win a Super Bowl even despite those shortcomings.
He doesn't like the numbers. He throws these thinly veiled criticisms at the, well, it's not just, that's math and all this, the Mr. Big Tough Football guy, like tries to, put in there's some things that the numbers can't quantify. I love that argument, but he clearly has disdain for it. But it doesn't seem like his fourth down decisions have any consistent logic to them at all. It really does seem like he just randomly decides to go for it.
Believe it or not, they've gotten better. They've gotten better, especially after he got Brock. I've always maintained that he will be more aggressive when he feels like the aggression will result in more sure things. Because again, he's someone who chases the sure thing. And now that he's gotten Brock as a quarterback, it feels like he is skewing more towards the more what we would consider traditionally aggressive Shanahan. And I think this season and last season, if you look at his like go for it when you should rates, they are more in line with league average. Like he's never going to be at the top end, right? But they're more in line with league average than they were when he had Jimmy Garoppolo and Nick Mullins, which is like basically, I don't know if I can get a yard or two. And so I'm not going to do it, right? Even with those quarterbacks, you're probably at a good clip of conversion. I do think he's going to go. He's trending more towards positive in fourth down decision making.
Heineman on Twitch says, Oscar, should they have a GM who's above Kyle Shanahan?
I don't think that would matter a whole heck of a lot because any good GM, even if they're above Kyle, is going to want to work with the head coach to build a framework of what kind of players you want and or like. Mm-hmm. And so Kyle is always going to have a hand in the profile of players that they go after. And I also don't think that Kyle is someone who's going to say, especially after he learned like from Joe Williams and those types of players, that he's going to say like, this is the guy I want and no other thing. And so I do think you want a general manager who's going to work with the head coach harmoniously. And I do think that Kyle and John work that way and work that way well. I think if you're concerned that like Adam Peters was the guy that was running the show, well, this year's draft class, sans Adam Peters, was one of the best draft class we've had in the last 3 years, right? So chances are that John Lynch is just like almost every other GM, which is like sometimes he's going to have good years and sometimes he's going to have bad years, but they're going to kind of average out near the middle, right? And so I don't know that having a GM above or below Kyle is going to change that a whole hell of a lot, especially if a good GM is really going to work with their head coach in order to make things go.
Yeah, I feel like really the key is every GM is going to hit and miss. Just don't have 2 of those years in a row. Don't miss 2 years in a row because then you really put yourself, like you're talking about, especially with the bottom of the roster and the special teams and all of that. And that's really what happened to them for the most part. They had 2 bad drafts in a row before this year's draft. And hopefully they can have another good one because they desperately
And a
needed.
lack of draft picks at the top, right? Because they had the Trey Lance trade, they didn't have first round picks. They also didn't have some second round picks. Like, so now you're trying to work with like third, fourth, fifth, sixth rounders, and that's problematic. I think the general manager aspect that always concerns me is when you continually invest resources in something and continually whiff, as they have on the defensive line outside of Nick Bosa. That is the part that concerns me, because Kyle and John bonded over like their philosophy of building from the inside out, building from the defensive line. That's super important. You have to rush the passer. You know, like we got to be able to rush with 4. And they've spent so many draft picks on that defensive line, and high draft picks too, first rounders, second rounders, and have not been able to hit on much of anything outside of I think Javon Hargrave was a hit, even though it was a slight overpay, but not by a whole hell of a lot. And Nick Bosa was the obvious choice. But outside of that, like Samson Ebukam and some of the like reclamation projects, when you're talking about like Arden Key and Charles Omenihu, which you let leave because you thought your defensive line coach was gonna turn them over anyway. I think that's the part that's concerning, because now you're looking at mock drafts and you're like, well, at least we're picking 15, and you're like, yeah, here we go, Kelvin Banks, hook him, and you're like, no, maybe defensive line. You're like, oh, really? Didn't we do this again? But it is a need, and it does make sense, so I do get it. But yeah, but that's not a over under Kyle thing. That's a stop picking the bad player at that position thing.
Oscar, I got news for you. It's going to be higher than 15.
Yeah, you know, it might be. But you know what? Hey, we're back. We've built a podcast empire off of the elegant tank. And
Yeah, let's go.
We are back, baby.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I feel like you've provided a little perspective, a little calmness in these troubled times. And we miss you. And you are always welcome here whenever you get the itch or the urge. Please, not that you need us for anything, but please don't hesitate to avail yourselves of us, because we are here for you.
I will. It was good to be back. It's gonna be fine, y'all. It's gonna be fine. This is not the year where it's gonna be like Super Bowl fine. But honestly, last year was Super Bowl fine, and we all still felt like crap afterwards. So, you know, let's just take a year off. Let's you know, maybe hit Cabo a little early, and you know, enjoy a bit more time in Cabo. Gives you more time to take a look at the offense. And you know what? The Warriors are good. So let's go ahead and just, you know, full on basketball mode. Let's do it.
No, man, I don't want to hear that. We still got like 5 more games, man. I can't focus on that just yet. Anyway, thank you, Oscar. We appreciate it, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Thank you, Rob.